Brain. We appear to be having out technical difficulties.
Yep.
So the intro didn't play, Spousey.
It played on my end.
Nope, the countdown played, the intro didn't.
It played on my. It played on my end. So
yes, we were watching you bopping away to the music.
Oh,
so no. Yes, technical difficulties,
yes,
folks.
Which is weird because it played on my end and it auto muted me, but it didn't auto mute. It didn't auto mute you.
It did. It auto muted me. I had to unmute myself.
Oh. No. I had to mute you. It didn't auto mute you. I muted you.
Oh, okay.
Because I thought the intro was playing. So we know it's going to be a good stream because we had technical difficulties.
Technical difficulties.
So, yes. And of course, welcome to anyone who is lurking in the chat and or watching in the future. This is our opening proper for our discussion on the Disney Renaissance. While, last week was our example of what was going on in other studios at the time.
Yes.
And at least my thesis for structuring this month the way I am is that you can divide the Disney Renaissance into 3 periods: the early, the middle, and the late. And the early period in this thesis is characterized by Disney essentially returning to its roots, returning to what classics stood the test of time, or the techniques in storytelling that, the types of stories that stood the test of time during their development as a studio, but doing so with more polish, making it more, refining their technique.
Yes.
And the middle Renaissance is characterized by branching out into different types of stories and also being a little more freer with their animation style. Because we definitely see a lot more animating to the cinema screen in the middle and later in the Renaissance. We will definitely get into that next week with The Lion King, because if there was ever a movie that was animated for the big screen, it was
The Lion King. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, this movie it has touches of that. There are obviously some beautiful set pieces. You've got the final ballroom scene. You've got the garden scene, which, if you look at the garden scene, I just realized watching it. When we watch Hercules.
Yeah.
It's damn near shot for shot.
Yeah.
So do bear that in mind. Although in that scene, it's Meg and Hades who are chatting. So keep an eye out for that. But yeah, this film. Look, I was a Disney child. I was not a Beauty and the Beast child. I had my issue with this film from a young age. I didn't like it. It was too girly for me. I was not, I say too girly for me, and then my favorite was The Little Mermaid. So, swings and roundabouts there. But let's get a few things said and laid to rest off the bat. This is a very white movie.
Well,
like it's provincial France. What do you want?
Yeah.
Like, what do you want? It's pre-industrial provincial France.
Yes.
Very specifically pre-industrial. It's very much of its time.
Yeah.
In its politics, in its approach to gender and sexuality, in its approach to just humanity, but also in its class conversation that it's having with itself and with its audience. There's a very structured class system, because I looked at this and I thought, hang on, how was there a prince in France? And then I was like, oh, it's pre-revolution.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
but there are some slight nods to the revolution stuck in there for the adults during one of the songs.
Yes. And there's a couple of nods visually to sort of, if you've ever seen a showing of Les Mis, that you'll spot. So it's not by any stretch progressive.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to sit here and bitch about that, because one, it's of its time, and two, it's a fucking Disney movie. You get what you pay for.
Yeah.
Which is my first point of the first song with the first opening, the cold open with the voiceover, who sounds scarily like David Attenborough. I didn't realize how it's that very stereotypical 1950s white man. He's not quite the newscaster, because the newscaster talks like this, and if you want a good imitation of what a newscaster sound like, find John Oliver talking about 1950s newscasters and just that voice. It's not that. It's David Attenborough. It's that very soothing, very authoritative, broadly accentless, although this one had a tinge of it wasn't completely RP, there was a bit of an accent there, but it's very 1950s BBC, where you don't hear an accent that's not RP. The Queen didn't speak the Queen's. Do we call it the King's English now? That's going to be weird. That's weird. Because the King definitely doesn't speak the King's English. Sorry, excuse me. I'm British having an existential moment.
Yeah. But and of course,
I'm sorry. An entire country has spent nigh on a century describing everything as the Queen's and the Queen. It's going to take us an adjustment period, folks.
Yeah. And of course, this opening is something that I would say supports supports the thesis statement, because when you look back to the classic Disney movies that stuck, when you look back to Snow White, Cinderella, Robin Hood, even the Jungle Book,
they all have that cold opening with the
Well, usually it was a cold opening with a shot of the book, but this is they've upgraded it a little bit, where we have the sweeping pan through the forest to the castle, and instead of being book illustrations, the cold opening narration is being illustrated in stained glass.
Yeah. So they've upgraded it. But same as with the Robin Hood, it opened with him in the prison cell. If it ain't Baroque, don't fix it. But in that opening line, there is this thing of, again, would it fly today? Of he had to find someone who loved him, and she. There's no suggestion. There's no way. I'm sorry. I haven't watched this movie since I was a very, very young child. for reasons previously elaborated on. And I'm sorry if you're telling me the clock and the candlestick didn't have a thing. You're a liar.
So
like,
and
they are basically, the clock and the candlestick are basically the two guys out of Glass Onion.
Yeah, and also, so what amuses me is, when choosing a movie for the early Disney Renaissance, we picked a movie that we were both not really into growing up.
Well, I mean,
yeah, because your early Disney Renaissance movie was The Little Mermaid. Mine was either Rescuers Down Under, or depending on whether you count Aladdin as early or middle, Aladdin.
No, Rescuers.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, like, we couldn't have done Little Mermaid, because if we had, you'd have just had me sat here doing, even for someone who is mixed race, probably borderline racist imitations of Sebastian and singing the songs, and you wouldn't have got any sense out of me, because that's a movie to enjoy the songs.
Yeah.
And to be honest, The Little Mermaid holds such a precious place in my heart. I don't want to go back and watch it in case it's not as good as I remember.
Yeah,
like, it's one of those movies for me. So yeah.
And I understand not doing The Rescuers, because The Rescuers is an outlier, but it still kind of falls under the mold because it was a sequel.
Yeah. Like, The Rescuers was... I enjoyed The Rescuers as a kid.
Yeah.
But it was very forgettable.
Yeah, and it's like Rescuers Down Under, what you can say what it did for Disney, Disney animation, but in terms of the Disney Renaissance and even the early Disney Renaissance, it's forgettable and it's an outlier because it was a sequel.
It's like, I remember watching Rescuers Down Under, and the only other memory, aside from seeing it once on video, that I have of Rescuers Down Under is the trailer for it was on the Oliver and Company. Would it have been video or DVD?
Probably video.
DVD? Oliver and Company, which is another one that's an outlier. You'll find with me, the Disney movies I love, aside from the big ones like Lion King and Little Mermaid, are all outliers. Like, I grew up and I liked... Well, I was a Pocahontas child for a while because she was the only Disney princess who wasn't marble white.
Yeah.
But, I liked Mulan. But even Mulan on screen was white. Like, how do you...
Yeah.
How did...
So
Mulan wasn't for me. Pocahontas was, and the other Disney princesses were all blonde-haired, blue-eyed, Aryan nation frigging propaganda pieces for Nazi fucker who ran the company.
Yeah.
How about monetization?
So that being said, Oliver and Company was pre-Renaissance.
Yeah. But Oliver and Company was brilliant. I loved it. I was an animal child. What can you do?
Yeah.
Oliver and Company. I don't think it was Disney, but All Dogs Go to Heaven.
Yeah, All Dogs Go to Heaven was Don Bluth. It was a contender for the other company spot, but Kevin Conroy died.
Yeah. I will say as well, All Dogs Go to Heaven for me, I have Oliver and Company, All Dogs Go to Heaven, and possibly Hercules around the same era in my mind.
Well, so
I don't know if that's right, but that's the order I saw them in.
Oliver and Company was released in '85, so 4 years before the Disney Renaissance started. All Dogs Go to Heaven was released 1989. I only know this because I checked release dates when I was looking for movies to pool as the other, the distinguished other. And then your third one that you mentioned,
Hercules is late.
Yeah, is late Disney Renaissance.
Yeah.
But that being said, we both grew up in the 90s, so
we saw everything as a mishmash of, and there were re-releases and straight to it. Disney was a mess in the 90s. Like, I remember seeing The Little Mermaid in cinemas, and I am way too young to have seen that on original release.
Yeah.
Like, I remember my parents taking me to the big posh cinema in the big city over the way.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't showing at our local cinema, but it was showing over there, and my parents taking me. I remember because my Tamagotchi died halfway through the movie, and that is the most 90s sentence you will ever hear out of my mouth.
Or, like, I remember seeing The Lion King in cinemas, but I'm like, while I was old enough to have seen The Lion King in cinemas, I am too, I'm not old enough to have been old enough to remember seeing The Lion King in cinemas.
Yeah, not like Little Mermaid was one of the very few movies we saw in cinemas.
Yeah.
But yeah, because I remember my Tamagotchi died and I was really annoyed. So yes, very 90s memory there. So yeah. Speaking of the big city over the way, I did not order a vicious call out with my serving of intro song number 1.
Yeah. So,
excuse me, sir, I'm in this song and I don't like it. Like, I'm not being funny, but all she does is read. She's a weird one. Yeah, that.
Yeah.
I mean,
she really is a funny girl, that noodle.
Yeah. And like, there must be more to this provincial life. I want to. Yeah. That's just. Yeah. Like,
Now. So, words. I can do. My brain can do the words things. I swear.
Your brain can word.
My brain.
I'm not an idiot. I swear.
But so I'd offer a guess that there is more of a reason than simply Disney did it that animated musicals were so ubiquitous up until everybody started rebelling against Disney when Shrek came out.
Well, the thing is, right, when you're animated, you're already a level away from reality.
Yeah.
And the problem with musicals is there has to be a level of suspension of disbelief to believe that people will randomly burst into song about their everyday lives. And it's much easier to get an audience to that point of suspension of disbelief when it's already animated, because it's already not real.
Now, I have actually, my argument would be that animation and musicals are really suited for each other in a different way.
Well, yeah, because you can make all the pretty colors with animation that you can in live action without a lot of CGI.
There is another reason.
Oh.
A slightly deeper medium and genre specific reason.
Go on.
So, medium wise, animation is very stylized. Even even when you get as quote unquote photorealistic as you can get, there are still stylization choices that can then be enhanced or toned down to help pace the plot and enhance dramatic and emotional impact. Meanwhile, on the genre side of things, it's very conventional. Like, think about when the musical numbers of a musical are. They're in points where you're establishing the plot or enhancing dramatic or emotional impact.
Yeah, moments of emotional or plot climax.
And once again, this is something that we're going to talk about in more detail when we get to The Lion King, because, you could say that Beauty and the Beast is very much a proto Lion King, in where that while it's very much they've polished their early stuff into a more artistic cinematic representation, they are starting to kind of play with new things.
They are. I think that's going a bit too far to give this movie that level of credit, because I think The Lion King, let's not make any bones about this, The Lion King was a masterpiece.
Yeah.
Absolute masterpiece. This is, at best, mediocre Disney on an off day.
Yeah. And
that final ballroom scene is very nice.
Arguably, I'd say it's...
Please...
Sorry.
But that final ballroom scene is very nice. But all the set pieces in this movie, Be Our Guest obviously is the big one that everyone remembers. But do you remember Be Our Guest because it was that brilliant? Or do you remember it because every single fucking advert about this movie had Be Our Guest blown up out of all proportion and made it look fantastic on it? Because I watched Be Our Guest today and I was underwhelmed by it. It was not what I was expecting.
Yeah. Or the fact that they used it for their, luxury resort ads for ever. Yeah. And I think they still are.
Yeah. And it's like this movie it doesn't live up to its own hype.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, it's a bog standard, come as you are, enjoy it, watch it Disney movie. There's nothing wrong with it per se. I mean, there's a lot wrong with it politically and culturally, but for its time and where it came out, there's nothing wrong with it. It's a bog standard movie. But nothing about it says, ta-da! It just doesn't.
And arguably, I'd say what was more of a proto Lion King would have been Aladdin, because that movie sits so perfectly between the middle and early Renaissance that you can't. It's hard to place it as an early or as a middle Renaissance movie. It's the transition between the two.
Yeah. I mean, for me, again, I go back to The Little Mermaid. It's the brighter colour schemes. I do think a lot of The Lion King as well, a lot of what we remember of The Lion King is the colour scheme. Those oranges and yellows and reds, they're just brighter, they're more lively. Yeah. Whereas this movie's colour scheme is blues and browns and the occasional bit of splash of gold. But it's very dull. That's the whole point. At the end of everything comes to life and comes to colour. And in that sense, I can see how this movie leads on to films like The Little Mermaid, like Lion King, like those movies we remember because they were bright. And the thing is, with Disney films, when you're remembering what you enjoyed as a child, of course you remember the ones that had all the pretty colours. There's a reason we remember The Little Mermaid and we don't necessarily remember The Rescuers. The Rescuers' colour tone was greys and blues and blacks. The Little Mermaid was greens and reds and purples, and it was just sumptuous and bright.
Yeah, and also...
it's the difference between a film about the working classes in the Middle Ages or the poorer classes in the Middle Ages, where it's all grey and dingy and there might be factory soot, and the upper classes, which is always described as sumptuous and, thrilling, and it's always all these gowns and bright lights and everything else.
He must be important. How do we know? He's not covered in shit.
Yeah, basically. And that's the thing. We bright colors appeal to us as human beings.
Yeah.
Let's hope there isn't a nuclear winter ever round the corner, because if there is, we're going to have like multiple generations of people to whom bright colors on plants are appealing, and that's going to be a problem.
Yeah.
If we have to start foraging for our own food.
Yeah.
And speaking of foraging, let's talk about hunting.
Yes.
Let's talk about Gaston.
Yes.
We need to talk about Gaston.
Yeah.
It's like we need to talk about Gaston, but also we don't talk about Gaston.
Yeah.
Now Gaston is. I have opinions.
Okay. So shall we go with? Okay. So we're going to open with what I like about. So we're going to open with my discussion on color coding in character design and how Beauty and the Beast uses it. Then.
Yes, let's start with that. Give me time to catch my breath.
Yeah. So we first see Gaston, and of course everyone knows Gaston is always wearing red, right?
Yeah.
Gaston's wearing red. Belle is, always, except in the ballroom dance scene, is always wearing usually blue.
And in the courting scene when she's wearing pink and red.
Yeah. And so usually color coding is you get your reds, and your primary colors are for the protagonists. And usually villains and antagonists are secondary colors, where you get your greens and purples. It was a what's the word, convention that was established in comic books and then picked up as animation went to color. But it was established in comic books because of how expensive ink was, and it was basically a quick and easy shorthand to contrast the hero and the villain.
Yeah.
Now, so we have Gaston wearing red, which shows us that so he's wearing the shorthand for a protagonist. He's wearing a primary color, but he is obviously not the protagonist, because one, it's called Beauty and the Beast, and two, he's an asshole, like from the first moment on screen.
I mean, he might be the Beast, but he's a different kind of beast.
Yeah, but here's the thing, though. The Beast is also wearing red up until he saves Belle, and then his cloak turns to blue.
But the red he wears is very muted. It's a very dark red. It's darker than this.
Yeah. So
it's almost brown.
Yeah. Well, it's a bit brighter earlier in the movie. It gets more muted as he gets softer, and then he wears a blue cloak during the courting scene, and then the blue suit in the ballroom dance. I'm pointing this out for a very specific reason, because the character design team is using the color palette of their two male leads to help tell the story of the Beast's transition from a spoiled, arrogant prick into someone who's learned to be caring and selfless.
He's gone from being a protagonist to being someone who could be content with being a secondary character.
Yeah.
And his color scheme reflects that.
well, and well, more. Well, also, Gaston is dressed like a traditional protagonist because he is supposed to embody those in traditional masculine values. Everybody except Belle, who can see through his bullshit, loves Gaston because he is the picture of
tall, dark, and handsome.
Yeah, tall, dark, handsome, fairy tale protagonist who goes out and slays the monsters, brings home dinner, big macho man energy. And
you say that, but like he's definitely compensating for something, and I think it's his steroid use.
Yeah, but yeah, like who eats 2 dozen eggs every morning?
5 dozen eggs. Yeah. He ate 2 dozen as a boy and 5 dozen as a man.
Yeah, but so my point is, the Beast starts out with his outfit matching, the color palette of Gaston's, and eventually grows softer and softer and goes to more complementary towards Belle's colors as he reveals his inner beauty.
But there's something you're missing.
Ah.
In every scene that has anything to do with romance, the characters are in red. Gaston's in red when he's talking about her. Now that is, it's his idea of romance. It's not romance, but it's his idea of romance.
Yeah.
When she's courting the Beast, she's wearing red and pink. She's wearing that cloak that looks like she nicked it off Santa.
That is interesting because she's wearing red and pink, he's wearing blue.
Yeah. They switch roles during the courtship.
Yeah.
And then at the end, she settles on yellow, which is neither red nor blue.
And he's wearing his gold. Blue suit. Yeah.
She is elevated by loving him, by, she's elevated from provincial backwater girl to princess. And he, in his way, is elevated blue with the gold accents of, she's always being humble. But the thing is, Belle's characterization in this movie is really bad. Like the way none of the characters know Belle for who she is.
Yeah.
Like she is not humble. She's not, kind. She's not perfect in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
She's dismissive. She's snobby. She's rightfully so. She looks down on the people around her because they treat her like shit. But she's got she doesn't respect privacy. She has no
she only cares
in caring about other people.
She only cares about 2 things: her own curiosity and her father.
Yeah. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. But a characterization of her as this idealized princess, this sweet, this classic Disney princess is I think it's a disservice to the character. Yep. She's ambitious. She has something that not many Disney princesses have. She has ambition, but she wants to read.
Yeah.
And the closest to a Disney princess you get in this era like that is The Little Mermaid. She wants to learn about you want thingamabobs, I got 20.
Yeah.
I got who's it's and what's it's.
Well, I mean, arguably you could say that yearning for more than what their life is kind of a staple of the Disney Renaissance princess.
It is, but the way she does it is very snobbish. The people, like the librarian or the bookseller, is very kind to her, and he's the only person fair. I'm, there's a reason I don't mix with a lot of people I know, because that's the attitude they have towards me. But there is this, from the very beginning, there's this thing of she's beautiful. She should be the perfect girlfriend for Gaston. Like, that should be signed, sealed, delivered in the first 3 seconds.
Yeah.
But she's got ideas above her station, and she, we don't want girls reading. They'll get to thinking.
Yeah.
And I have my issues with the way this is presented in her character. Because there's nothing wrong with how she is. But the way it's put together on screen, and the way she talks and the way she behaves, it gives me the ick. It makes her out to be a snob and to think herself cut above the rest.
Yeah.
And she clearly doesn't. She's just in her own little world. She's got a father to look after, and she's not that fussed. What bothers her is their judgment of her and their judgment of her father, which is why she distances herself.
Yeah.
Like, the reason we are geared to expect Gaston to be the thing until he insults her father.
Yeah.
Like, that's the moment he lost her hand in marriage. Let's be clear here.
Yeah.
Like, he may have taken her book and thrown it in a puddle, but the moment he lost her and was never, ever going to get her back no matter what was the moment he insulted her father.
Yeah.
And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that as a character, but the way she's presented is there's this sense of discomfort, especially if you're a girl who watching it who was like Belle, who was always into reading, wanted to get out. Disney had this habit until very, very recently, I mean 2010s, of if they had a female character who wanted to get out, who wanted to live her own life and think for herself and not be a puppet in other people's schemes, there was something wrong with her.
Yeah.
And she had to be fixed, and she had to eventually fall in love with the prince, because that was what was going to fix her and get her on the straight and narrow and make her into a good little wifey.
Yeah.
And that's a problem. And that's a problem with Disney, not with the character. Because that's what Disney does to the characters. Creates these brilliant, strong, intelligent, adventurous, ambitious young women, and then destroys them.
Yeah.
And that is Disney's MO. And that's why it's very difficult for me to watch these as an adult looking back.
Yeah.
Kids internalize these lessons. Like I said, I grew up, I was a Little Mermaid child. I was a Little Mermaid child because I wanted to see the world. I wanted to get out. I wanted to, see a bit of the world. And I identified with that. And the thing is, as a child, you look at this and you identify with, I didn't like The Lion King because Simba ran away from his responsibilities. That didn't jar with me.
Yeah.
But The Little Mermaid, she wanted to see the world and learn. And this, she wants to learn. She wants to see the world. And these films, when you're shown films like this that have this same cyclical pattern, the lesson you learn is be quiet, be obedient, do as you're told, and there's no point in dreaming about anything because some man's going to come along and destroy your dreams for you. And that's the lesson Disney taught us.
Yeah.
Until very, very recently.
Or basically, all that matters is supporting the status quo.
Yeah. It's like, well, it's like, there's a reason. My favorite Disney movies in order are Hercules, Robin Hood.
Yeah.
And probably Little Mermaid. What do those three things have in common? The main character breaks the paradigm.
Yeah.
The reason the Little Mermaid breaks the paradigm is because she wants to she is in love with the prince. She pursues him. That breaks the paradigm. Robin Hood, again, he's an outlaw. He's not right. Marion, she's a badass in that story. You know, she might dress like a nun, but she's a badass. She can keep up with him. You know, Hercules, again, Meg, one of the best female characters you will ever see in a Disney movie, bar none, right up until the modern day. And I stand by that statement, and I will elaborate more on it when we watch Hercules in 2 weeks' time.
Which will actually be the first time I've seen Hercules all the way through.
You're going to love it. Bring tissues, but also bring your singing voice. You're going to love it. Best soundtrack ever that Disney's done, including Encanto. Don't at me.
Because, you know, hashtag grew up fundy.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, don't at me. Hercules, a better soundtrack than Encanto. Don't at me. Mainly because I may be wrong, but don't at me.
Well, I don't know. The Lion King's got a pretty good soundtrack to it.
Still think Hercules is better.
Yeah.
But I mean, don't get me wrong. Elton John's good. Yeah. But 4 black women are better. Like.
Well, no, I'm not giving the praise to Elton John. We're talking about soundtrack, which includes the score.
Oh yeah, Zimmer. Okay, Lion King best score, Hercules best soundtrack.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll give you that one.
Yeah,
you can have that one.
And we're probably gonna have another version of my El Dorado rant when we cover the Lion King, because I have issues with the El Dorado soundtrack. and I'll probably elaborate on it again when we talk about the Lion King, because a lot of the same people who worked on the Lion King soundtrack worked on The Road to El Dorado. But we're talking about Beauty and the Beast. And and so, and of course, Noodle leaves after I go through my talk about the color palettes and color coding and how they use color coding to enhance the story. Now, once again, as emblematic of early Renaissance Disney, we don't really see much in the way of strategic stylization. The closest we really get is with how the opening is done in stained glass as opposed to the more traditional storybook, storybook illustrations for the opening narration. This is also the first Disney animated feature to get Oscar nods. I'll double check. I can't remember if they actually won anything, but they did get nominated. And once again, it's largely Beauty and the Beast is very much your back to basics Disney, classic Disney formula, where it's an animated musical, but they're beginning to more slow, they're polishing their technique and beginning to bring animation into the future. And of course, we are going to talk more about the progression of animation as as a medium, cinematic animation as a medium, when we get into The Lion King, because The Lion King is a masterpiece. And also, The Lion King was very much obviously completely edited or completely animated with the cinema, with the big screen of the cinema in mind. Beauty and the Beast, not so much. We get a couple of scenes that they're like, oh yeah, this was definitely animated with the big screen in mind. It was animated to look sweeping and impressive. For instance, the only real standout with in terms of animation technique that I can think of when it's like, yes, this was animated to look impressive on the big screen, is the ballroom dance scene during the, Beauty and the Beast song, which technically isn't the final ballroom dance scene, because there is another after they've turned human, after the Beast and all the servants have turned human. I'm talking about the one that opens, with Mrs. Potts singing, the in the background, tale as old as time. And you have the Beast and Belle walking towards each other on the staircase, and they go down into, and they have their ballroom dance. And you've got this big sweeping pan of the ballroom floor that turns up to the, to the Renaissance architecture, and the almost Sistine Chapel-like painting of the cherubs on the ceiling, and this big grand sweeping ballroom shot that really stands out from the rest of the movie, because the rest of the movie is very close quarters, very old school moving figure on a stationary background, with the exception of the opening shot where it's panning through the computer animated forest, and which, once again, was a technique that was pioneered during Rescuers Down Under, was mixing computer generated backgrounds with your traditionally animated characters moving in the foreground. And of course, as we discussed, it's a technique that was picked up in other studios as well. And welcome back, Noodle.
Okay, so sorry.
So yeah, if you need me to kill time, just get me rambling on about animation technique.
I mean, that's what we're here for.
Yeah.
Cool. Right, let's see.
But
so we were talking about, you did the color code, and we were talking about the sort of the way Disney handles girls and women and what have you. And it's very clever, because you can't quite tell with this movie, and with a lot of Disney movies, whether they're self-aware or not.
Yeah.
Because the exact message that they are feeding children, young girls, is the message they put in the mouth of their villains.
Yeah.
Girls shouldn't read. They get ideas and start thinking. And then you present as a film in which girls who get ideas and start thinking are hamstrung and become pretty little wifeys for princes.
Yeah.
It's... I don't credit Disney with enough self-awareness for that to be ironic.
Yeah.
And they do it again. They do it like when they talk about people who are odd.
Yeah.
It's like obviously it's deliberate humor that the father says, "My daughter odd," and comes out looking like fucking steampunk Inspector Gadget. But it's like, okay, but you're making these jokes, but you don't realize, what's odd to Disney? Someone who wears glasses and invents things.
Yeah.
Like someone who's a free thinker who invents. And do you know what he was inventing there? An automatic wood chopping machine. I'm pretty sure we don't have that now. Or like if we do, it's still a very specialized piece of equipment in the timber.
Yeah.
They still cut wood by hand.
Well, yeah. I mean, you've I've seen footage of like big logging trucks that strip the tree and cut it to be transported, but aside from that,
for
firewood, it's it's still largely done by hand.
Yeah, because that's still the cheapest, most efficient, most useful way of doing it. And it's just one of those things where, again, Disney has this nasty habit of people who are forward thinking. Every genius is a lunatic until the idea works.
Yeah.
And Disney very much leans into that. And that's a problem, because the lunatics are always people that these girls supposedly identify with or love or have some relationship with. And it is very much this thing of the overarching messaging is stay in your place, do as you're told, rural is better, Jeffersonian ideals.
Yeah, well, and then of
be
course,
a good little wifey and massage his feet. It's it's a problem, especially because you do get kids who, I don't know about you, but as a kid, I was alienated by these messaging.
Yeah.
Like I said, the movies that I spoke to me were about a lion, a fox, and a mermaid.
Yeah.
Because they weren't human, and therefore human social mores weren't applied to them as much.
Yeah.
There's that, and the fact that the lion could pass for being not white, and mermaids don't have a race, and the fox was kind of brown. So I'm claiming that one for the non-white kids. We didn't have a lot to base it on. Which is why I think our generation, late millennial, we're not that old, but our generation, this is why I think our generation has stayed with Disney or has returned to Disney recently. It's perfectly normal now to see 30-odd-year-old people with no kids watching a Disney movie.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that in the 90s? Like, we were the kids Disney was aimed at. But, if I'd have had an aunt or my mum had a friend who just wanted to watch a Disney movie, that'd have been weird. She'd have been weird. She'd have been, or he'd have been weird. There'd have been something wrong with them. There'd have been side eyes. There'd have been probably whispered accusations floating around.
Yeah.
And it's like,
though, that could be and that could also be more about the cultural attitude in regards to animation as a medium, because animation as a medium is one of the big juvenilized media we have.
Oh yeah, no, I am not saying that there hasn't been a change in attitudes to animation, but I also do think it's because our generation was the generation that wanted, South American families, that wanted non-white characters and didn't get them.
Yeah.
And now not only are we the ones in the animation room creating the animation, or at least our peers are, we are the ones who are absorbing this animation and who are returning to it, because I think at some point Disney realized they can't just pitch to kids because kids don't have disposable income.
Yeah.
And so they had to pitch to adults, and that meant,
or rather, the fact that animation as a medium had progressed enough to where they can't and in the post Renaissance collapse, enough competition has propped up, enough sizable competition has popped up that they can't just hey, we're the biggest people that can produce something that you can sit your kids in front of. They've also got to play up to the adults, more than they would earlier.
Yeah, very much so. But I do think there is a thing of, our generation, I think Disney had a lot of problems when we were kids, and I think I don't know about you, but I'm very glad to see Disney has grown out of those issues.
Yeah.
Or at least appears to have onboarded enough people from Pixar to look like they've grown out of those issues. Because, you know, if you'd have asked me as a young kid, you know, preteen, I'd have probably said I'm a Pixar child, not a Disney child.
Yeah.
As much as I loved Little Mermaid and Pocahontas, as problematic as that was, let's not go there. She wasn't white, therefore she looked like me, and I liked it. That's all that. That's as deep as that went. I was a Pixar kid.
Yeah.
I wanted to be a cowgirl. I wanted to, you know, like I actively remember having a Jessie doll as a child.
And also, like, you've heard me mention it earlier on the channel, I'm sure, but you know, Pixar is one of those animation companies. Well, is the animation company that has its own separate scale, because just about everything they do is at least good. So you've got to kind of judge them opposed to their other content.
Yeah. And like again with this film, I was saying this film is at best it's Disney on an off day. It's mediocre.
Yeah.
This is Disney sticking to the 70% rule. This is Disney saying 70% and done because we can't be asked. It's not.
And as I mentioned while you were gone, I think this is I think Beauty and the Beast was the first animated feature to get Oscar nods.
Yeah. And I will, there's something I want to say, well, because you were talking about color theory earlier, and something I wanted to say, but I got interrupted and I forgot, because I do that.
Yeah.
Disney makes this mistake with this film, and does with many other films. And many other films make this mistake, and not just animation. Just because the themes of a story are dark and dank and miserable doesn't mean I have to be straining to fucking see what's going on screen. Turn a goddamn light on.
Yeah.
Just turn a fucking... Please!
Yeah.
It's not artistic and la-di-da, and you shouldn't be proud of the fact that you're giving your audience eye strain to see what the fuck's going on.
As a good example, and I know I'm bringing this, I'm bringing this movie up so much in this month that it probably should get a banner, but you know, counterpoint, the Prince of Egypt. Look how brightly lit the plague scenes is, and that's some dark shit going on right there.
Exactly. So it can be done.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should have had Prince of Egypt as the counterexample.
Yeah, I was going to have Prince of Egypt as the counterexample, but someone didn't want to do it.
Oh, yes, because someone has a lot of Catholic school religious trauma bound up in that movie.
But, I mean, you know...
It's me. I'm the problem. It's me.
But, I mean, you know, that being said, we could always do a month on the rise of DreamWorks.
Let's put a pin in that until we're both in the same country, because I'm going to need cuddles.
Yeah. Yeah, because that will also include Spirit, Stallion of the Cimarron.
Yeah. And I watched Spirit over Christmas because I was feeling mawkish and sentimental, and I cried.
Yeah. But,
I love how you just let me sit there pouting.
Yeah. But there's a reason why we bring up, or why I specifically bring up, you know, the Prince of Egypt and the rise of DreamWorks while we're talking about the Disney Renaissance, is because in my opinion, the culmination of the Disney Renaissance wasn't Tarzan. The culmination of the Disney Renaissance was the Prince of Egypt. Because DreamWorks was started by a bunch of artists and executives that split off from Disney. And they took all of the techniques developed and codified during the Disney Renaissance to make a Disney killer.
And then they decided to pick the Old Testament story to go with.
Well, and we'll probably talk about this in more detail when we eventually talk about the Prince of Egypt. But you could arguably, especially given how much anti-Disney theming is in early DreamWorks pictures, you could arguably say that it's a personal exodus story for the theater or for the studio.
I mean, yes, but also, like, if you went to Catholic school in the 90s in England, I can't speak for Ireland or Scotland, your understanding of Exodus comes from that movie. Because that's what your teacher put on Thursday afternoon when they were hungover or whatever the fuck, and they needed to shut the kids up.
Yeah, and like I said last week, the kind of reception the African American community gave to Black Panther, the religious fundie community gave to Prince of Egypt.
Right, I was not aware of that.
Yeah.
I mean, I was aware that it had a big impact because I saw it a lot in Catholic school in the 90s. But
churches, would gather funds to send groups of kids to go watch the Prince of Egypt in theaters.
Damn.
Arguably, I'd say it was partially because they had alienated themselves from Disney during the Middle Renaissance, because like there were more extreme, crazier fundies that got pissed off at the Lion King, but then the American religious right really turned on Disney after Pocahontas.
How do you get pissed off at Hamlet, the lion story? As a religious fundamentalist, walk me through that.
Rafiki being shown as a shamanic figure, and the ghost.
In Africa, you've got a problem with a shamanic figure in Africa.
Like I said, it was we're talking like the you can't read Narnia extreme fundies.
Oh, okay. Because we come from very different backgrounds. Because where I came from, Mufasa was basically the voice of God.
Yeah,
like that's how my religious background interpreted that movie.
Yeah, and we'll put a pin in that for next week because remember I know fundies who were crazier than my family.
Wow, that's scary because I've met your family.
Yeah, and so in terms of comparison, my family put the line at Pocahontas. I know families who put the line at the Lion King.
I mean, my parents put the line at the Lion King, but that was for a totally different reason. There were only so many nights they were going to put up with me waking up crying.
Yeah.
Same way they put the line at Bambi because there's only so many nights. I was a sensitive child, okay? I was a sensitive child.
But back to the topic at hand.
Speaking of sensitive children and things, there's a lot of in this movie. I see what you mean when you say this movie kind of was. It definitely is the foundations a lot of the classics are built on.
Yeah,
and that's what I want to talk about because we've got the crossroads and the horse recognizing the right way to go, and the visual shorthand of two paths diverged in the wood, very biblical.
Yeah, and of course, the one looks, the one that's obviously very safe, and then the one that's the spooky, scary, dangerous path, and of course, he chooses the spooky, scary, dangerous path.
Yeah. and then you've got the wolves coming, but again, that's wolves coming out of nowhere, the spooky, dangerous path. There's a lot of things in this movie that are you see them in later films. You see them in early films as well, but you can see the foundations. Let's blow on a dandelion to change the scene, or the floating seeds become, or the floating flowers become a new scene.
I want to talk about that refrain, or that reprise of Belle, because I'd argue that that's also one of the few scenes in this movie that's animated for cinema. And also, if you've ever seen The Sound of Music,
yes,
that is obvious.
Yeah,
that is very much a homage to The Sound of Music.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
Which we should do at some point, because we've never done Sound of Music. We should just add that to our list.
Yeah, the ever-growing, never-diminishing list.
Yeah. And we then, once we're actually in the castle, we have the third floor corridor on the right-hand side is out of bounds. The West Wing.
Yes.
And there's always something, isn't there? There's this curiosity, there's got to be a mystery.
Yeah.
In The Lion King, it's that shadowy place. You must never go there. Which it became a meme.
What about that? What about that shadowy place? That's the hyena concentration camp.
I think my favorite rendition of that meme is, and what about that place? What's that? It's like, that's where the managers hang out. As a union man, you must never go there. Which was brilliant, and I love it. And power to the unions, and support the strikers, etc. But that brings me on to, and the reason I brought up that meme and that joke is because I want to talk about how this film manages class. Strap in, folks. Strap the fuck in.
Yeah.
Right. So, this movie goes out of its way to create a class structure very, very early on. You've got Gaston, who's obviously daddy's little rich boy-ish, worker, but then you've got the working mob, if you like, the working classes. You've got Mrs. Potts, whose accent, I couldn't figure out what her accent was trying to be. Was she trying to be like Oliver Twist London? Was she trying to be Southern American? Like, her accent's all over the place. But it's very obviously designed around, let's make her sound common as muck. Let's make her the housekeeper, because that's what she is. And if you've ever seen Downton Abbey, you know the kind of accent I'm talking about. That's what it's looking at.
Yeah.
And again, with Chip, his accent, he's a child, but even still, his accent is not refined in the way Belle's is. Yeah. And there's a class structure going on. And even within the lyrics of Be Our Guest, you've got Lumiere. Look, you have to understand, in France, a slight historical aside, in France, being a waiter, it's not like being a waiter or a waitress in America where you work minimum wage for tips. In France, being a waiter, especially a high-end waiter, which is what he is very Downton Abbey. It's a good, solid job, and it's respected. Like, you call your waiter Mr. Monsieur. You don't, your waiter, it's a skilled profession. It's up there with being like a doctor or something along those lines, or a diplomat. Like, there's a level of skill required to be that level of waiter in France.
Yeah.
And again, the housekeeper, very proper, very, Humphrey from Yes Minister, basically.
Yeah.
And it is that there's an accent thing going on. And it's not subtle. I was going to say it's subtle. It's not subtle, and it feeds the, you know, God forbid the prince or the main girl in it have a glottal stop. I have a glottal stop. You've probably heard it.
Yeah.
You know, God forbid that, you know, the prince drop his letters.
Yeah.
That was not deliberate, I swear. You know, but there's a lot of class mechanics going on, and people who are of lower class, who are servers, are born to serve, want to serve, and that's all they want out of life.
Yeah.
Now, in the French context, service as a very high-end job, as an appealing job.
Yeah.
In the era of this movie, yeah, that works. But in the English-speaking world, it doesn't, and that's why the accents jar. Because you expect your housekeeper, your waiter, your valet, your head of the household, servants to have very proper accents. They probably know the etiquette rules better than the people who live there, because they're the ones whose job depends on it.
Yeah.
But then having these very lowbrow accents creates a dichotomy that doesn't work in the, like, it only works in the English speaking world. It doesn't work in the context this film claims to be in.
Yeah.
Which is just an interesting thing I noted and have issues with, because I you know, and again, this idea of the characters with quote unquote funny accents,
Yeah,
they're the ones who are a bit thick. Not necessarily in a bad way, like, but Mrs. Potts, like, she's not intelligent as a character. She's very motherly, but she's not intelligent as a character. Then you've got,
I mean, I think Mrs. Potts has a bit of emotional intelligence going on.
But again, emotional intelligence is never presented on the same level as literary academic intelligence. It's not valued in the same way. In the same way, the characters who knock about, who are Gaston's hanger-ons, they've got funny accents.
Yeah, LeFou
and the others.
Well, I mean, it's mostly just LeFou and then just the general townspeople.
Yeah, and it's like Lumiere has this very, very French, not even very French, a very cartoon French accent.
Yeah. Like
he's comic relief. His accent is comic relief. He's not there to...
I've been burned by you before.
We'll get onto that, because there's a discussion I want to have about the mop, but I'm building up to it.
Yeah,
I haven't had
the
enough
feather
alcohol
duster.
to have that discussion yet. Yeah.
Not
enough alcohol in me to have that discussion just yet. But yeah, accent and class. But there's one thing I do want to know.
Yeah.
Disney's very good at dodging the censors.
Yes.
Did you notice? So there's a moment where Lumiere is quite horrified and says the word "zut alors."
Yeah.
If you speak French, the censors clearly didn't speak French.
Yep.
Because basically it's mild. It's mild, but even for a Disney movie, it's a bit much.
Well, I mean,
it's mild blasphemy.
Well, I mean, so is Sacre Bleu, which Lumiere also utters.
Yeah. Sacre Bleu, zut alors, very similar phrases.
Yeah.
Zut means damn, or, you know.
So it'd be like...
Or as the Christians would say, damn.
And,
because you need a stitch. I don't know. I don't
understand.
And,
of course, the dishes listed in Be Our Guest aren't fancy.
Yeah, they're the soup du jour and the hors d'oeuvres. So the finger food and the soup of the day, which was yesterday's special, which was the day before's regular menu, because that's how soup of the day works, folks.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that's how it works. You don't order the soup of the day or the special because it's just yesterday's leftovers. That's what that is. It's like ordering the chef's choice. The chef's choice is always going to be the thing that's easiest to cook.
Well, I mean...
He has different priorities to you.
Well, actually, you know what? In the context of the movie, it actually makes sense. And I just realized this because the stove was complaining about how all the food's going to go to waste.
Yep. Soup du jour.
Yeah.
Yes. So yeah. And then you've got the comment of, and again, bound up in class and riches and money.
Yeah.
The Rococo design has been stripped back to reveal the what was the line?
Yeah.
What was the line? I want to talk about it because it's interesting, but I need to get it right.
Oh.
As you can see, the pseudo facade is stripped away to reveal a minimalist Rococo design. Note the unusual inverted vaulted ceilings. This is yet another example of the neoclassic Baroque period. And as I always say, if it's not Baroque, don't fix it.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got a point. Baroque's fucking awful. It's a assault on the senses. Like every classic sort of French, covered in gold, cherubs on the paintings, that look, that's Baroque. Like the Borghese Gallery in Italy, like most of Versailles.
So we have the Sun King to thank for that.
Basically, yeah. So Baroque, the style started 1600s ish in Rome and spread across Europe.
Yeah.
So, and the Rococo design is early 18th century, so it's the one that followed on from the Baroque period.
Okay. So here's the question, seeing as how you know something about architecture. Is he just listing off buzzwords, or does it actually have meaning?
It's more accurate than you'd think. He's not just listing off buzzwords. So, for example, the Neo-Baroque and Rococo design of the stairway in Beauty and the Beast, that stairway design is it's reminiscent of a lot of things, and there is a story. Apparently, the animators did tour France when they were looking for ideas.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of artwork actually in the film on the walls that is an homage. We'll say an homage to existing art, Vermeer's, Rembrandt's, Goya.
Yeah, and well, I mean, a lot of the poses, especially in the transformation scene, are very Renaissance art reminiscent.
Yeah. So, like, and again, you know, you've got a lot of the girl with a pearl earring is on the wall, in one shot. The tapestry on the wall when they're having dinner is The Swim by Jean Fragonard. Can you tell I'm reading this and I am garbage with French names? But they've flipped it and they've put it on. And again, so it's not that this movie is very good. For what it is very good. And you see, you know, you do see a lot of it. Some of this, obviously, some of what I've just told you is what I know. Some of it's what I've read when I just did a quick Google. But I would recommend, you know, if you're interested in that art style, do have a look at it. It's not a bad, and this is what I love about Disney in this era. It did its research.
But
like,
or, you know, speaking of doing its research and, you know, things that didn't work in the context of the film but work for a modern audience, I'd like to propose a flip of that, where we had a scene where that works in the context of the time period that it's you know, taking place in, but doesn't work for a modern audience.
Yes, it's yeah.
Yeah.
Poor Chip. Poor Chip.
Oh no, I was talking about the meeting with the asylum keeper.
Yeah, we'll get to that. Well,
Yeah.
I have opinions. But yes, let's go there. The asylum.
Yeah.
The asylum for loons, as it says on the
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Asylum for loons. And the very stereotypical psychiatrist.
Yeah, and well, for reference, insane asylums during that period were not mental health care facilities.
They were, but they were very primitive.
Yeah.
And I just need to. Beauty and the Beast. What year did it come out?
91.
So this movie is very much taking the One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest as its model for psychology. And now One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is an amazing film. It's brilliant. It's got its issues. Some like it's obviously meant to be a psycho thriller. It's not meant to be a accurate depiction of psychotherapy in any time or place. But it is probably more accurate than we would like it to be.
Yeah.
I think that's a fair, broad assessment of that film before moving swiftly onwards. But that film did enter the zeitgeist. And most people, if you say to them, asylum, mental health hospital, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is the mental image they have.
Or, the famous Bedlam.
Yeah, Bedlam. Fear of that. Yeah. Shakespeare famously nearly went mad losing his son, and fear of that place put him right. John Donne as well, same.
Yeah.
Fear of that place supposedly put him right. It was not a therapeutic environment.
Yeah.
It's not to say they weren't trying. Like, electroshock therapy, as horrific as it looks, works. But when you see it, what you're seeing is, if you're seeing it on film, what you're probably seeing is that people are not given general anesthetics first, or even local anesthetics first. You're seeing that people are forced into it and that it's used as punishment rather than treatment. You're seeing it in the framework of a very unethical, very violent environment that may or may not have ever existed historically. But this thing of, yes, let's teach children from a young age that the heads of asylums will take money to lock them up and are conniving and evil. And let's do that, because that's going to have a great impact on their mental health as adults when they need help. That's really going to make them feel like they can ask for help, isn't it?
Yeah.
Opinions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
But it's because we do a little bit of pre-chatting as we watch the movie when we spot things worth mentioning. And Noodle brought up that point, and my counterpoint was, like, asylums back then weren't exactly the nicest places to.
They weren't. They were much more like prisons than you would think.
Yeah, that's
not to say that the way they're presented on screen is accurate, because it's not. And I will say that, as horrific as a lot of the historical things, lobotomies, electroshock therapy, ice therapy, as horrific as a lot of those things are, not counting lobotomies because they're barbaric, and I'm so glad they're dead in the water and they don't get done anymore. No one's going to lobotomize you. It doesn't happen. They were originally, the aim was to be therapeutic.
Yeah.
But the problem was that before we got into the era of antipsychotics and antidepressant drugs in 80s onwards, 70s at a push, the problem was that the way you knew someone was sane, or the way they thought they knew someone was sane, was when they weren't a problem.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily the case.
Well, and, you know, one of the first things the asylum, you know, keeper says to Gaston is Maurice is harmless.
Exactly. Which, yep, he is. But that's the thing. That's what asylums were for. Asylums were not for people who needed help. Asylums were for people who were a problem.
Yeah.
And therefore they were very much more punitive and much more like prison.
Yeah.
But that's not to say that the people there didn't want to help if they could. Because and again, it's this thing of, you all know I'm studying psychology, so you know I take everything I say with, I have a bias in this conversation.
Yeah.
I have benefited hugely from psychiatric help and continue to do so. I believe psychiatric help should be available for everyone, and you know, when it's done properly, it's life-saving and life-changing.
Yeah.
But there was a time when it was every bit as scary as this film makes it out to be. And it was very much an environment where, let's be honest, evil psychopaths like that fucker could flourish. There's a reason the psychologist is a TV trope.
Yeah.
It's like, that's the trope name. Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah.
Eat your heart out. Not literally, please. Because we all know where that goes. But again, psychiatrist, psychologist, evil psychologists. We saw it most recently in the Marvel TV show where he got ordered to have therapy.
Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
That's the one. The psychiatrist was clearly a few screws loose. You know, a few biscuits short of a picnic. And it's a trope. And I have a problem with it as a trope.
Yeah.
Because it's, when you see that from all sides, when you get that from all sides, it makes it very hard to ask for help when you need it.
Especially since it can be arguably described as a result of the wider and more ubiquitous trope of trauma as motivator.
And not only that, but where I come from, being sectioned, i.e. being held under a section of the Mental Health Act, I think Americans call it committed.
Yeah.
That's a threat to most people. That shouldn't be a threat. That should be... That's a last resort for people who desperately, desperately need help.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be used as a threat to make children behave or to keep people in line, which is what it's being used for in this plot of, oh, we're going to section him to make Belle obey.
Yeah.
Which is... it gives me the ick.
Yeah.
It gives me the ick, okay? It just does. It's gross.
I've been thinking,
I don't like it.
A dangerous pastime, I know.
Yes, it's very dangerous. Don't do it. But then this leads us to kind of, once we see that plot, we then see Belle leaving the castle and becoming, you know, and it's very... I don't want to say it's very Greek, but it is very Greek, isn't it? Greek tragedy of attacked by wolves. Like, we all know what that's shorthand for. You don't need to spell it out. And he rescues her, and it's the first genuinely unselfish thing he does.
Yeah.
He rescues her with no thought for his own safety, having chased her down, and she could leave and she doesn't, and he would let her leave.
And, you know, not only that, but she puts her cloak on him.
Yeah. Again, that colour theme of, you know, coming through in the colour of the cloaks.
Yeah.
And that's your Volta in the text, if you like. That's your moment of no return.
Yeah. And
it's very Pride and Prejudice, you saved my sister from ruin.
Yeah.
You know, it's you did something good for me, and oh, I see that you're actually a decent human being now. Weird.
Yeah.
I didn't notice that before.
There must be something there that wasn't there before.
Yes, your eyes have been opened to the fact that he's, you know, and the thing is, this prince is clearly traumatized. He's clearly suffering. He's clearly, you know, agoraphobic, and yeah, there's a lot going on. But there's this whole thing of you have to learn to control your temper, which does come full circle in this movie.
Yeah.
I'm not excusing people who lose their temper. I'm not excusing it.
Yeah.
But be aware that a short, violent temper is a symptom of a lot of traumatic responses.
Yeah.
Being triggered can result in a violent, tempestuous outburst, and not just crying in a corner. Like you've all seen me do it. You all know what I'm like when I get triggered. I got Again, that's not a temper, that's a trauma response.
Yeah.
And it has taken 25 years of my life for me to understand the difference.
And
weirdly, I don't have a big temper normally. I have trauma responses, and then I have a reasonable temper. I talk a lot and shout a lot, but I don't. There's a line.
And I mean, you know, having your body forcibly changed into something inhuman would be very traumatic.
Incredibly traumatic, yeah. And I'm sure there are trans readings of that, being forced into a body you don't want, being forced to live a life you don't want to live, and everything else. You know, the reading's there if you want it. Go nuts.
I wasn't necessarily going there, but I mean, it's there if you want.
It's definitely there. You can read it if you want to, by all means. But there is this whole thing of when you love someone, you let them go, which again, classic Disney. Appears in every fucking Disney movie at some point. It's like Disney has its own hero's journey, and one of the stages on the hero's journey is in love, but must relinquish ownership of that love. That's a thing that has to happen for the story to progress. It's
though
just a
that
at this point.
In the terms of, you know, this story in particular, it is very, very necessary, because that's what changes the dynamic from captor and prisoner to mutually. It brings it more equal.
Yeah, she came back. She did not have to come back.
Yeah.
She, as kind-hearted as she is, and again, this goes to show how kind-hearted she is, where we've been presented with her as a bit of a weirdo until now.
Yeah.
You know, she doesn't respect privacy. She's not necessarily this ideal, but she has a kindness about her in that she won't see him, let's be honest, lynched, because that's what's going down there. And we will say the word lynched. Note that as the Beast, he has dark fur compared to all of these Whitey McWhite faces, and then move swiftly onwards, because I don't want to have that discussion right now. And that this movie is not the discussion to have that about. It's not the movie to have that discussion about, because there are much better movies to discuss. Speaking of, a movie about Emmett Till got released last year, and if you didn't know about it, you should probably see it. It looks like it's going to be good. I have it on my list. But apparently it's not being advertised in America, according to Ring. So
Yeah, I hadn't even realized it has existed, and it came out, it was released in theaters in October.
Yeah. To be fair, I saw adverts for it, but they were at the start of YouTube videos, and who the fuck pays attention to those? Yeah.
I mean,
I mean, yeah,
when
but it's you.
yeah,
You
when
are
it's
like the.
when it's for a movie, I pay attention to those. That's why I'm like kind of stoked for Renfield coming out.
Okay, but there's like 4 people on the planet who pay attention to those trailers, and I married one of them. Okay, like, yeah, like, love's not just blind, folks. It's bloody stupid, okay? I love you, Ring, I do, but you've got to admit you're weird in that regard.
Yeah.
Like, you are not representative of the population in that you watch the trailers for movies when you're waiting for a YouTube video.
Yeah.
That's that's weird. Like,
well, I mean, I have skipped through movie trailers while I'm waiting for a YouTube video. Basically,
if you've seen them before.
No, like there's like if it doesn't catch my attention by the time the skip option comes up, I skip it.
So 5 seconds.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is fair. But
yeah.
Again, do we want to have the discussion about scaremongering and propaganda? Oh, before we do that, just one thing. When they invade, because it's kind of linked to the comment I made about this potentially having a trans reading.
Yeah.
When they invade the castle, there's a particular invader
whose
punishment
the dresser
is being dressed up. Yes, the dresser. The dresser. Yeah. Drag as a punishment. Feminization as a punishment.
Yeah, that I cringed a little bit at that.
I mean, I cringed at that, and I would have still been cringing at that if it hadn't been immediately followed by sexually assaulting the feather duster.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, and not even like full, like, the poor feather duster.
Yeah.
Like, I no.
Yeah.
No.
Oh my, it's like no. a lot of the the battle for the castle is very, 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 very slapsticky.
It is very slapstick.
And then you have something that only the adults will realize as a full-on sexual assault going on screen for like a good 10 seconds.
Yeah. And is played for laughs, which is, and I mean, as an adult, I understand that is geared towards making me hate the invaders of the castle. Yeah. Like, they're not just doing it to protect. And again, very telling. And how did generations watch this movie and not get this message of the people who are making accusations that the monster is going to eat their children and harm their children are the ones committing sexual assault on his staff?
Yeah.
Just look. There's a message there about Fox News and Tucker Carlson and the right wing and the January 6th committee.
And
basically, right wing accusations are confessions.
Well,
clearly,
50 Frenchmen can't be wrong.
50 million Frenchmen can't be wrong.
Yeah. No.
Also, have you met the French? You get 50 Parisians, I promise you they can be wrong.
Yes.
I refer you to that fashion of berets.
Yeah.
What?
I mean,
but yeah.
You can make a beret work.
You can make a beret work. I can't.
Yeah.
You could absolutely make a beret work.
I did make berets work.
Oh, I forgot you've been to France.
No, the cap in the Class A uniforms are a beret.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've now got a mental image of you in that uniform with your hair as it is now as an air hostess.
So I'm
this
sorry
is what
that
happens when you're in a long distance marriage, folks. Your brain does things.
Yeah. So now that a new kink has been unlocked live on air, hashtag not for children.
Yeah, definitely not for children. But yeah, this whole thing about the scaremongering and the way Gaston does it, the accusations that are made of he's going to come and eat your children, he's going to, it's very. Look, I've realised that all mob scenes hit different after January 6th.
Yeah.
They do. They just hit different, okay? And especially when you're not on the side of the people who were part of that mob, which I should hope if you're watching this you weren't, because what aspect of our existence did you think was congruent with your view of the world? If you did support them,
and if you didn't, I have at least 3 separate videos, 2 of which were live streamed, about why you're wrong and why that was a terrorist attack. I'll just gesture vaguely in the direction of my Analyst Ring playlist.
Yeah, exactly. So but this movie goes out of its way to villainize the mob. Like they sexually assault the staff, they destroy things for no reason. They claim they're protecting the children, but they're actually just in it for a fight.
And monetary gain, because remember what Gaston says: take all the loot you want, but the beast is mine.
Yeah. And again, it's not the most. Look, it's just it's a problem, and it does make me laugh because people talk about and I've done it. We talk about these movies; they leave marks on children, and you remember the messages even if you don't remember the movie.
Yeah,
Disney has spent several generations, I would say, villainizing the mob.
Yeah.
TM, copyright, yada yada. Because anytime you see people with pitchforks and torches in a Disney movie, they're not the good people.
Yeah.
At best, they are the not well-led, not educated people being led down the garden path.
Yeah.
And at worst, as in this case, they are blatantly not in it to do anything decent.
Yeah.
And I think it's very telling that the mob appears first outside Marcel's house.
Yeah.
Is it Marcel? Is his name Marcel?
It's Maurice.
Paul's father. Maurice. I don't know why Marcel got stuck in my head. Look, all white French names are the same to me, okay? Maurice. Look, all French names are the same. I'm British, okay? I'm allowed to dunk on the French. It's a national pastime. Don't worry, they got us back. They're still in the European Union. So, we're even. But the mob shows up to see a man taken into an asylum.
Yeah.
A man who is demonstrably and stated as not dangerous.
Yeah.
Like they go where Gaston sends them. Like that's their entire thing.
Yeah, they basically their point is to hero worship Gaston and be set dressing.
Can I point out Gaston in red? All he's missing is a nice little cap to go with it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
So, and then we have the big set piece fight, which again, very comparable to the Lion King.
Yeah.
Hanging off the edge of things and
being saved and then falling later. Like
Yeah.
as we were watching it, I was like, oh, here comes the Disney fall.
Yep, the Disney fall. And it's very much, sorry, I'll do anything. And it's like, and again, it's this moment of, in the moment of virtue for the beast, you have to learn to control your temper.
Yeah.
What's a better way of demonstrating you've learned to control that? By showing mercy.
Yeah.
And so, the power of love and all that jazz.
Yeah, and also he doesn't fight. He doesn't start. Well, one, he doesn't
start fighting. He's too depressed to fight until he sees Belle, and then he's so changed as a person that he doesn't have the rage in him to kill Gaston.
Yeah.
Because it's a Disney movie.
Yeah.
But also because it's indicative of the fact that he's changed as a person, he's grown, and he's no longer that vicious, violent beast who threw Maurice into a jail cell. And it's again, this happens a lot in Disney movies.
Yeah.
Simba is going to let go of Scar only to get jumped on afterwards. Like it's the classic. I'm no killer, but you just threw 4 people off a building.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, like the villain falling to its death is a Disney trope and has been from the beginning. The first animated Disney feature was Snow White, and it fought and how does the evil queen die in Snow White?
Yeah.
She falls to her death and is buried in an avalanche.
Yes, because it's Disney's answer to Catabasis, the descent to the underworld, the descent to hell, if you like. It's a Christianization of the Greek descent to the underworld. That's a classic trope in drama.
Also, it's a really good way to kill off the villain without showing it on screen.
Yeah.
And you can't really have
it almost it also removes the hero from a lot of the fault for it, because all they did was let go.
Yeah.
They didn't actively kill someone, all they did was let go.
Yeah.
Or not. It's like it's kind of reversed in The Lion King 2, in which the character is on the edge of the cliff, falling, and the character who she's trying to kill through the whole season, through the whole movie, saves her by reaching out to her. And it's this full circle of, actually, if you want to be a hero, it's not just about not actively killing the villain by letting go. It's about not throwing them over in the first place and saving them if you can. And this movie gets that really well.
Yeah.
He doesn't throw Gaston over. And Gaston being removed later is because he's struck out in a moment of agony.
Yeah.
It's not, it just pushes Gaston off the edge of the screen. It doesn't, you don't know what happens there.
Yeah.
And it therefore retains the innocence of the so-called hero characters.
Yeah.
It's like no one tell Batman, but blunt force trauma does kill people.
And it also retains the G rating.
Yeah.
Of the,
and it's like, yeah, and it's all bound up in this love changes everything. The power of love, the transformative power of love, the power of knowing that you are loved is so important. Do I like that is then bound up in love transforms you from beast to prince? Not necessarily, because that's not a great message to send to people who are in loveless environments or abusive environments.
Yeah.
That the only way out is to find someone who loves you, when maybe you don't necessarily believe that's possible because of the environment you're in.
Yeah.
But I see what Disney's going for, and they've got, But can I point out, that is a strategic fucking balls up to the nth degree. It's like, you can be honorable or you can win. Pick one.
Yeah.
Like, Deus ex Disney, like, does not work in real life. Your choices in that are be honorable or win.
Yeah. But, you know, like, the falling death is, like, once again, the falling death is very popular. It's a trope in Disney for a reason. It, you know, it makes the, you know, it kills off the villain while keeping the movie G, and it also absolves the hero from, you know, from wrong.
And then immediately, because the hero is violently killed, gives them the whole born again innocence, you know, 3-minute resurrection.
Yeah.
You know, 3 minutes, not 3 nights. We don't have time for that. It's a Disney movie. But yeah, that's a very Christian thing, is that? That's very, you know, you do something, you kill someone even if in self-defense, immediately die and have a spiritual and physical resurrection that physically changes who you are and makes you lighter, brighter, and more and less earthly and more heavenly. We'll go with.
Well, yeah, and I mean,
it's not subtle. It's not subtle.
The gargoyle, the demonic looking gargoyles on the castle are turned into angels, angel statues.
Yeah. There's suddenly that, you know, the whole thing of, and the sky went dark and then brightened, and you'd know somewhere in the castle a curtain got torn.
Yeah.
Like, that happened. Like, come on, tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong. Like, it's not subtle at all. It's very much the Passion of Christ for the kiddywinks in 2.5 minutes.
Yeah.
And that as an ending, again, it's very Disney, it's very saccharine, it's very sentimental.
Yeah.
It's very Christian.
And, you know,
it's very right-wing American.
And, you know, closing out on a, you know, on a reprise of the ballroom dance with them both as human.
Yeah, but the ballroom dance, even that, the color scheme is blues and grays and bright colors and gold. And it's heaven. It's an idea of heaven. And again, once you notice the Christian coding in the last bit of this movie, you cannot unsee it.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, arguably, you know, you could say the last bit. You know, given how the opening narration was shown in stained glass.
Yes, it's look. There's a great thing they teach in British history. I don't know if they teach it in American history.
Yeah.
So when they're teaching us the Cromwell years in history, there's a worksheet they give out, or at least they did at my school. And the worksheet is, there's two sides of the worksheet, and one side is very stereotypical stained glass window Catholic church, and one side's a gym with a table, basically. Very Puritan. And the idea is it's a colouring page, and there's a character in the middle who's saying, I don't know which one I should be, depending on the year, and you have to sort of fill in the worksheet to get the year. But there is, and I don't know the source of it because we're going back 20 years, but I remember being told a story of a priest who basically was a priest at a very rural, very poor area, who said that the stained glass windows worked in Catholic churches. The Catholic Church had a beautiful stained glass window, but it was a depiction of hell, and it was gruesome and it was twisted.
Yeah.
And he said, my parishioners don't need to know how to read the Bible themselves, because when they come to confession, they all talk about that stained glass window and how they don't want to go to hell.
Yeah.
That's what that kind of artwork's for.
Yeah.
That's what that was for. It was to keep them ignorant and to keep them afraid. That's what that's for. And to make them awed and to make them believe that this awe is some kind of religious experience instead of just appreciation of some really good fucking artwork.
Yeah.
That's what that's for. And that this entire movie does play into that provincial French. Obviously, pre-revolution France.
Yeah.
Which, like, look, we had Catholic monarchs in Britain who ran to France, you know.
Yeah.
Like, France has never been Protestant.
Yeah.
Ever. Famously so. Probably proudly so.
Yeah.
France went from Catholic to Republican with no in between. Like, that's just the thing that happened. And it stayed Catholic, even as it was Republican.
The Huguenots would like to have a word or two.
Yeah, but like they were never.
France was never
the powerhouse.
France was never officially anything other than Catholic, or officially Protestant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Officially anything other than Catholic, not Protestant.
Yeah.
Let's not mix it up.
Yeah.
No, like Spain, famously Catholic country. Italy, famously Catholic.
Yeah.
If the Protestants ever got power, it was for a short blip of time, and it's not something you're going to be taught in history class.
I mean,
unless you go to a school with who are Protestant and want to make a big deal out of that.
You know, hell, for a few decades, France was the seat of Catholic power in Europe.
For a few decades, there were 4 popes, so know. 3 popes, 4 popes, 2 popes. No, a lot of popes.
Yeah.
Plus that Greek fella who may have been a pope.
Also,
Turkish fella, sorry, not Greek.
Also, Christianization of pagan elements, ? To be presented and then to be decided on whether or not we'll discuss by the actual pagan in the room.
Kind of.
Yeah.
Elaborate, please.
Well, the person, coming disguised as as a hideous old beggar asking for the night, and then in the opening story she's presented as an enchantress. In say an older version that may very well have been a goddess or a fairy of some sort.
Not my branch of polytheism, so I'm going to bow out of that one, but I will say in the original fairy tale, the prince didn't do anything wrong to be cursed.
Yeah.
Which very much ties in with the demonization of magic practitioners who were basically, by this point and continue to be, by lay people who are not within those communities, synonymous with pagans.
I mean, as long as France has been Christian, it's been Catholic.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably what we, and then of course, obviously before that there was a mishmash of different pagan faiths.
Before that, France was Gaul.
Yeah, before that, France was Gaul. Like, I'm pretty sure as long as there's been Catholic, France has been Catholic.
Yeah, pretty much.
Because, like, most of what we call France was well within the Roman Empire at the time.
Yeah, well within the Roman Empire. Didn't really. Yeah, and when the Catholics took over the Roman Empire, France was just there.
Yeah. So
by then the Gallic tribes had been well and truly destroyed.
Yeah, so yeah, before, before France was France, France was Catholic.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest, the history of French national religions goes whatever the Gauls worshipped or did, which I'm not going to comment on because I don't really know, not my area. Yeah. Roman Catholic, Asterix comics, whatever they're doing now, which is...
Well, I mean, it was Roman Catholic, small blip of the cult of reason when everyone was getting their heads cut off by Robespierre.
Oh yeah, the Age of Enlightenment. Yeah. The Age of Enlightenment was a blip though, not a rule. So
yeah, it's like Roman Catholic, Reign of Terror, Roman Catholic, whatever they have going on now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Berets and onions. I don't know. I'm British.
Yeah.
I say all this. I have nothing against the French, and I'm not British enough to actually give a shit about the football result.
Yeah.
So when I say all this, I am fully satirizing the anti-British, anti-French kind of thing. That's me going just full satire. Like I'm not even. I have no opinion whatsoever on the French, aside from the fact that a few that I've met are quite rude. But also, that's a few, not an entire country. So I reserve judgment.
Also, I will say this as a depiction of the Beauty and the Beast, story. I very much prefer episode 1 of season 2 of The Witcher.
I can't say I've seen it, so I wouldn't know.
Yeah, but yeah, no, seriously, episode 2 of season episode the opening of season 2 is very much just Beauty and the Beast, but Geralt's thrown in there to,
Okay, but isn't The Witcher just medieval Poland?
Yeah.
Okay. Side note, while we're on The Witcher, because you'll never hear me talk about The Witcher again because I watched one episode, got bored, and didn't carry on. I heard people saying that The Witcher was exotic and mystical. Look, Poland's a lot of things, but exotic and mystical and mysterious. You can get there on a plane in 2 hours.
Yeah. Well,
no, stop it. If your exotic is Poland, you done fucked up. Just, yeah. Well,
so, but that being said, this is people who were raised on Disney, and up until Aladdin, Disney didn't really branch out of things considered children's literature by Western Europe. And I mean, even Aladdin is kind of a mixed bag because, at least some are aware of some of the story, at least some of the stories from the, 1001 Arabian Nights had filtered into ubiquity and, Western, in the Anglosphere.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, look, we all know that unfortunately in the English-speaking world, we're taught that the medieval world is England, France, Spain, sometimes Germany on its off days, when it's sending princesses to Henry VIII, and that's about it. And occasionally the Dutch get involved, but only on their way to England. That's the medieval world. That's not the medieval world. Other countries have histories. Yeah. And just because when something is based on the history of those countries, i.e. medieval Poland, that doesn't make them exotic, it makes you ignorant.
Or to put it this way, we're talking about people whose idea of fantasy is comprised almost entirely of medieval fantasy is comprised entirely of J.R.R. Tolkien and Disney.
It's the War of the Roses with dragons. G.R.R. Martin.
No, Lord of the Rings, J.R.R. Tolkien.
Yes, J.R.R. Tolkien, but it's also the War
Yeah.
of the Roses with dragons.
Yeah.
Which is the other big one everyone knows of and thinks is imaginative, and it's just not.
Yeah. But once again, this is a big down point to early Disney that they will begin to slightly branch out of in terms of storytelling when they enter it later into the Renaissance. Now
they got to the 90s and they were still in the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
Like, literally the Roman Empire moved faster. Alexander the Great called and asked if you wanted to borrow a horse because you were taking your time.
The only classic era, the only Disney movie that takes place out of Europe or out of I'm before up until the point where we're at, 1991, Beauty and the Beast. The only one that has taken, the only one that's taken place outside of the Anglosphere, because Rescuers Down Under is in Australia. Outside the Anglosphere, which I'm using broadly, is The Jungle Book, but that doesn't really count because it's based off a Kipling story.
Yeah. Oh. The less said about Kipling, the better when we're discussing race and diversity.
Yeah.
Moving on.
The first movie to take place outside of the Anglosphere proper, it will be Disney's next movie, which is Aladdin.
And again, a classic, but not without its problems.
Yeah, and once again, that's why I'm say Aladdin's very much like you can either it's very much a transition between the early Renaissance and the middle Renaissance, because while while some of the more famous of the 1001 Arabian Nights stories had filtered out to be somewhat ubiquitous in the Anglosphere, it's still kind of branching out a little bit. But it once again, and we're probably going to say this when we discuss The Lion King as well, Aladdin is very much a transitional point between the where we start to see what was established in the early Disney Renaissance change and morph into what we will later see established in the middle and later Renaissance.
And I think we've spent the last 20 minutes talking about things that are not the movie we're supposed to be talking about.
Yeah.
Which probably means we need to wrap up. But yeah, this movie, of its time, competent animation, very obvious storyline, hits all the right plot beats for a Disney movie. It's a Disney movie, you get what you pay for. Girls should read and do the thinking and get the ideas.
Yeah.
And then not go off and marry princes and throw their lives away. That's what they should do. Or if they marry a prince, it should be one that's willing to travel with them.
But as we mentioned earlier in the stream, we didn't really pick Beauty and the Beast because it was anywhere near either of our favorite movie growing up from this period. It's because it's most emblematic of this period.
Yeah, like if you think, Disney, this era, it's Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah.
I think, there were movies that were bigger, that lasted longer. Little Mermaid.
Yeah.
But that was not This movie is very much of Disney's roots.
Yeah.
This movie does what the classic era of Disney did, which was takes a Grimm's fairy tale, puts it in the bath, cleans it up, takes out the scary bits, but not all of them, and puts it on tape. Like that's what that was Disney's MO for a long time. And if it ain't Baroque, don't fix it.
Yeah, and and Disney and is like I said, in terms of the early Renaissance and for Disney and the Beast, it's taking the classic Disney formula and polishing it up to be more presentable, to have a more air of artistic credential to it.
Yeah. And this is the thing, right? There's a reason Disney got so big so fast and stayed in power for so long. And it's because it's the best animators in the world. It's the best artists in the world. The songs are nothing to sneeze at. The ones in this one are broadly forgettable, but and this movie is emblematic of all of that. The problem with this movie is when you take the entirety of Disney, this movie is in the bottom 50%.
Yeah.
But for its time, where it was and what it was doing, it was pushing the boat out, and it was testing the waters of better animation, better color, better design. And for me, this is you had the Disney classic era, and then you've got the Disney Renaissance. For me, this movie was the foundation stone.
Yeah.
The problem with the foundation is it's rough and ready. It's not quite there yet, but you can see Hercules in this movie. You can see other movies that followed. And I say Hercules because seriously, shot for shot, you'll notice.
Yeah.
But you can see flashes of the brilliance that gave us The Lion King.
Yeah.
You can see flashes of the brilliance that would produce other classics. And therefore, I think, as mediocre as it is, it cannot be discounted in the story of those other classics.
Yeah.
Without Beauty and the Beast, there is no Lion King.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that Beauty and the Beast is anywhere near on a par with the Lion King.
Yeah.
It's like it's not even on nodding. Beauty and the Beast goes and hides in a corner when the Lion King enters the chat.
Yeah.
But without one, you don't get the other.
Yeah, it's like how, you can't talk about the beginnings of the, Disney Renaissance without mentioning, Beauty and the Beast, much like how you can't talk about the history of American cinematic animation without talking about Disney.
Exactly, yeah. It's a foundational stepping stone. It's required, but it's still a little bit rough. It's a little bit...
Yeah.
It's being polished, but not quite enough.
Yeah.
And we see...
It's polished, but we're still in the roots of the tree, of the growing tree.
Yeah. Flashes of brilliance, but it's not... They haven't quite figured out how to sustain that brilliance over the length of a feature length yet. They haven't quite figured out how to animate... Like, you see it in the ballroom scene. The ballroom scene is very beautifully animated. And you can see how that ballroom scene led to The Lion King.
Yeah.
But if you take an early scene from the film and put it next to The Lion King, you wouldn't believe they were the same animation house. That's what I mean by flashes of brilliance.
Yeah.
But still not quite there yet. And not sustained enough to create a masterpiece yet.
Yeah.
But yeah, a stepping stone, a useful one. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step.
Yeah.
And this, I think, is a very good first step, even if it is a little bit wobbly.
Yeah. So, join us next week when we're discussing The Lion King.
Even more than we have this week.
Yeah. when we're discussing The Lion King in detail and not as a landmark in the journey of the Disney Renaissance, because it does kind of loom large over the rest of the Disney Renaissance.
It looms large, does it? Is it like a giant Pride Rock on the horizon?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if the Lion King is Pride Rock, then Beauty and the Beast is that shadowy place.
we must never return there, Simba. Some other channel announcements and shilling. So if you haven't seen my announcement / OGL 1.1 overview video that I released on Friday, secular D&D is dead. When I get to the point where I can, have a paid subscription to StreamYard and get back into streaming tabletop games, I probably will go back into running streamed tabletop games, but I'm not going to be using D&D.
Valid. That means you're going to have to teach me a new tabletop method.
Yeah.
Because D&D is the other one I know.
Yeah. And like I said, I released a video on that on Friday. It's actually doing some pretty decent numbers, but that's probably because I flashed or I tagged the tagline with all the tags algorithm section with all the proper buzzwords. And because if you are outside for those of you who are outside the D&D sphere, the OGL stink is becoming enough of an issue that Legal Eagle actually did a video on it. So, so it is.
I do strongly recommend that Legal Eagle video if you've not seen it and you are a D&D player and you do make homebrew things that you talk about online. It might set a lot of your worries to rest. But as Legal Eagle says, your mileage may vary. He's not giving out legal advice.
Also, if you want to understand what's going on, I highly suggest the D&D Shorts channel, because he's actually getting information from people inside the company, and he's getting direct leaks from inside the company and is, doing his best to both protect his sources, but also get the word out.
Yeah.
That being said, my next edited video is going to be a Dungeons and Divinity video, because as I stated in more detail, that I consider that satirical commentary on the Bible and very much within the realms of fair use. So it's
there's no copyright on the rules of D&D, so you can use them for things like that. And be fine.
Yeah, I consider it something that Hasbro and WotC won't try to grab. It doesn't in my opinion, it doesn't matter whether or not they have any legal right to grab or to try and grab, because I'm not in a position to where I could defend myself from them trying to grab.
Valid.
Yeah. So it doesn't yes, I saw Legal Eagle's video and I do very much recommend it, but however, it seems to me that even though what they're trying to do has no legal grounds to it, for small fry like me and people bigger than me, it doesn't matter because we don't have the wherewithal to defend ourselves from that.
Yeah.
But coming up hopefully Wednesday will be a Dungeons and Divinity episode that I've teased for like 2 years now on a meme that started out in a junk shop library stream. So we're getting into real niche community territory right here. Yeah. So with that, next week is The Lion King, and we will wrap the month out with Hercules. And then we're doing a schedule to be announced month on Classical Reception.
Mm-hmm. So
yeah,
that should be fun. I love how we're leading into that with Hercules.
Yeah.
It's like 90%. I should point out, when we were scheduling, folks, 90% of the reason I recommended that as a month theme is because if we didn't do Hercules in Disney, we were doing it in the Classical Reception month.
Yeah. And actually part of the reason why we're doing Classical Reception month in February is because we're closing off this month with Hercules because it just makes sense to end with the late Renaissance. But we're also opening Rings Grab Bag month up with the Sandman.
So yeah, reception.
Yeah.
I don't think Sandman is Classical Reception, is it? I think it's Norse Reception. Is it Norse?
No. It's a mixture of classical and Christian reception. Dreams, like one of Dream's canon names is Morpheus.
Yeah, that's tenuous at best.
And he was canonically married to Calliope.
Okay, yeah, but on that basis, the Matrix is Classical Reception, so...
No, as in the muse Calliope. There's an episode in season 1 of The Sandman where Calliope is bound to a human author against her will, and she reaches out to Dream for help.
Bound to a human author against her will?
Yes.
Hashtag channel punching bag. I mean, I'm just saying.
Yeah. But yeah, I think you'll like The Sandman. Though that being said, it is based off a ostensibly horror comic, so a couple episodes do get really disturbing. So
it's
trigger
based
warning.
If it's got, blanket trigger warning for February. Classical Reception can be disturbing as fuck.
Yeah. So
like Zeus is his own trigger warning.
Yeah. So Lion King, Hercules, Classical Reception, and then The Sandman.
And that's So that's where we're looking.
Yep.
I think that's everything, isn't it? That's all the channel admin.
Yep. But yeah, if you want to get a more detailed idea of the OGL drama, D&D shorts, and Legal Eagle, if you want a more detailed idea on how I view it impacting my channel and what I'm doing in response to it, my video. But with that, we'll go to taglines.
Take care, be good, and if you can't be good, remember, use your noodle.
And remember, the purpose of a storyteller is not to tell you how to think, but to give you questions to think on. Too often, we forget that.